Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Beyond Africa podcast with me, Ngalim Bernard, your host. And today we're talking Cameroon again. We've told you before, the elections are here, October 12, 2025. The president is 93 years old. He's been president for 43 years. He's running again to succeed himself. And if he wins, he'll run out the mandate at 99 years old. The question on every lip is, can Cameroon have a new future? Can there be a new Cameroon? Or why are things happening the way they are? How can one person who is 93 years old be expected to win the elections again? With me in the studio today is somebody who has been on the political scene in Cameroon for many years. He's a law professor, he's a legal practitioner, he's worked with the United Nations, and he understands all the details and contours of Cameroonian politics. He's been tagged all names in the political scene. He's remained resistant, resilient, but committed to his convictions. I'll present him to you, but before I present him to you, kindly like, share, subscribe, and above all, leave comments, because those comments tell us what we're doing, what you expect to hear, and also guide our conversations and the path we should take on this platform. So now I present Dr. Simon Munzu to you. You're welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast, Dr. Simon Munzu.
Dr. But if you like, for the purposes of this conversation, if you allow me to call you just Bernard, I'll be quite happy to do that. So thank you. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to call me Bernard. Thank you so much again for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast.
Thank you.
You have been on the political landscape of Cameroon for a very long time. Those who have followed the Cameroon political landscape, the tripartite conferences, multipartism, the Anglophone Crisis, the Amazonian movement, know your name, have read from you, have listened to you, have watched you, and now it looks like this is a critical juncture in Cameroon's history. Whether you're looking at it from the Anglophone crisis or from the political landscape, one thing is clear. There is a determination at this point where everybody is rallying around a call for change. How do you read the temperature around these elections going forward?
Well, I noticed that there is tremendous interest amongst our population concerning this 2025 presidential election. And there is hope that change would come. And that's understandable, because whichever aspect you take, if you are honest, you are bound to come to the conclusion that things are not right in our country, and they haven't been right for a long time. Now, in a context where the forces of the nation, in terms of civil society, businessmen, traditional rulers, and so on, in a context where everybody is allowed to play their role and to function within their own space, uninhibited, it wouldn't matter so much who is president. And citizens would be entitled to say, well, yeah, there is just one more election, someone is going to emerge as leader. But as it turns out, in our own context, in the Cameroonian context, and I suppose beyond Cameroon, elsewhere in Africa, and perhaps even beyond Africa, the president of the republic, the head of state, commands so much influence that the space that is left for these other actors is determined by what the president chooses to do. For example, government policy affects how universities in our country function. Government policy determines how the organization of CEO, the so-called patronat, so if you like, the investors' organization, how they function, how the chambers of commerce function. The attitude and actions of our government have a great influence even on how our traditional rulers function, because everyone has to, in their activity, has to show that they are in favor of the establishment. I would go even to the extent of the same thing applies even with our church leaders. So in that context, in such a context, it becomes very important who the population choose to be their president. So I'm not surprised that there is this enthusiasm about the presidential election this year.
Yeah, I hear you very well, and there are some issues I would like to raise with you from your preliminary statement. But before I get to those, over the years, you've been very active on the political scene, except for when you were Deputy Secretary General, Deputy Representative of the Secretary General in Côte d'Ivoire. If I'm wrong, you correct me. But since These elections have been making noise all over the place. I haven't heard or read from you. What accounts for your silence? Is it strategic, or are you routing for someone, or are you working for some campaign team and you don't want people to hear you out right now?
I'm intrigued that you noticed that, because indeed it is true. I've deliberately decided to, I don't know whether to say lie low or shut my mouth until this moment concerning this cycle of presidential election. And for me, that's simple. You know, I remind people all the time that I am not a politician. But if you observe, in the 30, 40 odd years that I have been on the political scene in Cameroon, it has been not as a politician, but as a political observer, analyst, commentator, and above all, advocate for reform, for good governance in my country. And so, yes, you're right. In the period that I worked for the United Nations, I went silent as required by the laws of the United Nations. When you're working for the UN, it is a requirement on UN staff not to get involved in the politics of their country or any member state of the UN, the internal affairs, except with respect to voting. You can take part in voting in your country, but you're not allowed to speak on political issues. Since I retired in 2016, first in 2012 and then again in 2016, continuously since 2016, I've gotten back to being vocal. And this happens to have coincided, as you will notice, with the so-called Anglophone Crisis, which in fact is only one aspect of Cameroon's governance in general. So the Anglophone Crisis is, of course, related to our governance in general. So I have once more,
Does that Anglophone crisis actually give a clearer view of the governance problems in Cameroon?
In a way, it does, because number one, governance system in Cameroon, right across the board, is characterized by the refusal of the governing elite of the ruling party to engage in a civil manner with anybody else in talking about our country. Now, at any given time, then we are going to have only one person as president. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It's not a matter of the individual. At any given time, we are going to have a government of Cameroon. And when one person is president, he is president for all Cameroon. When one set of people constitute the government, they are governing all of Cameroon, including people in the opposition, north, south, east, and west, Christian, Muslim, everyone. And therefore, it becomes important for those who are in power to recognize that they're in power for all Cameroonians, and that therefore they ought to have an open mind to engage, discussion, dialogue, and so on with their compatriots from outside their immediate political circle. That's how citizens who are not in government participate and contribute to the functioning of the government in their country. Now, but unfortunately, that's not what we have. And it is bringing up the point in relation to the Anglophone problem. It is this characteristic of those who are governing us not to want to engage in dialogue with anyone else that has made this problem linger for so long. In 1993, when we convened the All Anglophone Conference in Buea, we came out of that conference with a document called the Buea Declaration, which laid out the grievances of the Anglophones and which was sent to the government. The government had taken us seriously at that time and listened and engaged dialogue with us, the Southern Cameroonians, the Anglophones. Believe me, we would have found a solution to this problem no later than 1995. For a conference that took place in 1993, the first one, and 1994, the second one. But the government, as usual, just turned a deaf ear, resorted to intimidation and victimization. Now, that was then. You would have thought that the government would learn a lesson in the meantime, because the problem didn't go away. Now, when this new phase started in 2016, with the action of the teachers and the lawyers, and the Anglophone problem once more came back center stage. Again, you would have expected a government to say, well, there is a real problem here. Let's sit down with people and discuss it with them honestly. Again, since 2016, would have found a solution. But true to its characteristic, the regime in Yaoundé, which doesn't have a culture of discussion, dialogue, negotiation with non-governmental actors, did as it usually does. just turned. So that's where we are. And therefore, when you ask me, the correlation between the governance in Cameroon, characterized as I've just described, and the Anglophone problem is that this government has an attitude that does not allow us to discuss issues. Let me give you one quick example before. I can see that you're trying to ask something else. But one quick thing, around the time that the lawyers and the teachers started the action that eventually led to where we are today. Now, students of university students in Guinea Conakry, went on strike, into the streets, started something of a rebellion because the government did not distribute, I think it was computers or something to them as they were demanding. Alpha Condé, president of the Republic of Guinea, went to the university campus and had a conversation, as it were, with those young people. And by so doing, he managed instantly to diffuse what could have been a protracted dispute. Now, some people will say that, yes, the government of Cameroon, through Prime Minister Philemon Yang and others, did engage discussions, dialogue with the teachers and lawyers, but no. As usual, they engage from the platform, the position of, you are going to accept what we want or else. No sincere attempt to dialogue and negotiate.
That is what I've been itchy to ask all along, and you noticed it. You already mentioned the establishment of a very strong presidency, which has led to a very strong ruling elite. I hesitate using the word elite sometimes to describe this class of people, but that is where we are. And when you look at the actions they took towards the Anglophone crisis and the actions they have taken towards the validation of the candidates that are competing in these elections, do you find the correlations worrying?
Yes, I find correlations, and the correlations that I find are indeed worrying. But again, this is still within. This is just a manifestation of that phenomenon that I described a short while ago. Now, if you have a situation, a context in which the institutions that the Cameroonian people have given themselves cannot function without the directives of the strong man, President of the Republic, then everything is skewed. Take ELECAM, Cameroon's electoral board. You know that the Constitution of Cameroon provides very clearly that sovereignty, the Cameroonian sovereignty, lies with
the people.
The people, exactly. So you and I know that. And it goes on to say that the people exercise this sovereignty through the election of the President of the Republic and by way of referendum. Okay? And then the same Constitution gives the President of the Republic powers. Now, and the same Constitution states that political parties will compete for the sovereignty of the people. And the body that has been set up to organize, supervise, run elections is ELECAM, Elections Cameroon. So Elections Cameroon is there as the state institution that is intended to ensure that the will of the Cameroonian people is reflected in elections. The Cameroonian people to whom sovereignty belongs, and that the sovereignty is exercised through elections. It places on ELECAM the responsibility to serve the Cameroonian people and make sure that the will of the Cameroonian people triumphs at elections. But what do we see? What is election actually at every stage? I'm not telling you anything new. You wouldn't be telling me anything new. Every Cameroonian can see that is so. ELECAM bends to the will of the incumbent regime. And why is that so? That is because every member of ELECAM is appointed by the President of the Republic. And when they are appointed, instead of seeing themselves as having that sacred duty to the Cameroonian people to make sure that the will of the Cameroonian elector, voter, is reflected in our elections, because it is the only way, one of the ways that the people exercise their sovereignty. Members of the election don't see it that way. They see themselves as owing their position to the person who appointed them, and therefore they act according to the will of that person. The same thing can be said of our parliamentary institution. of a parliamentary institution. The way it functions is such that for you to be Speaker of the National Assembly, you have to be nominated by your party. And in a country where the majority party has been without interruption since the creation of the CPDM, 1985, I think, that party has been the dominant party in the assembly. So what happens? The Speaker of the House is elected every year, okay? And so every year, the CPDM has to renew its quote-unquote confidence in a particular person for that person to become Speaker of the House. And how does that pass? It passes through the President of the Republic, who is also national chairman of the ruling CPDM, through the political bureau nominating Bernard Ngalim to be their candidate for Speaker. And of course, once they mention your name, it passes. And that's how a certain Mr. Kabaye Jibril has been Speaker of the House year in, year out for the length of time that we know. Same thing on the side of the Senate. Since the creation of the Senate, the same phenomenon. One person has been Speaker of the Senate year in, year out. Again, because he sees himself, just as his colleague of the National Assembly, they see themselves as owing their position to the President of the Republic. They don't see themselves as being heads of institutions which the Cameroonian people gave themselves under their constitution, for which they are paying a big price in terms of funding those institutions, but they don't see themselves as serving the Cameroonian people. And we can repeat that here, the same phenomenon here and there.
Yeah, I remember when Kanto was preparing his candidature, the Gwawuna put up a statement saying, if you use MRC or if you use FCC, no, you are not going to be qualified. You are not going to run. And when he came through Manidem, the same Gregoire Owona said that this is a lost battle. And then we saw Tanganji doing everything possible to reject, or doing everything possible for Kanto's candidature to be rejected. This simply echoes the strongmanism you have outlined here, where everything is being done to bend to the will of the President of the Republic. But the bigger question most people are asking now is, where is the President? Nobody has seen him come out and talk, or come out and represent himself, even declares candidature, or even show signs that he's going to compete at these elections. But he is the leading candidate, and everyone, as you have already said, and everyone knows that he's going to win. So at this point, it's become so glaring that it's no longer one person, one strong person, but a group of people who have taken power into their hands and are managing Cameroon. What do you think about that assertion?
Well, Bernard, our country is inching towards self-destruction, and it would be remiss of us Cameroonians to pretend not to see this coming. I am not a prophet of doom. I am, by nature and temperament, an optimist, and I want to think that nothing sinister is going to come up in our country in the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. But at the same time, I read the leaves and I can see that things could go one way or the other. President Biya, as an individual occupying the post of president, had gotten us Cameroonians used to the fact that he doesn't have to be present. Even before 2025, or for that matter 2018, in previous presidential campaigns, did you see President Biya conduct himself as an ordinary, I was tempted to say a normal presidential candidate would do? Did you see in 2011 President Biya come out as a candidate and travel through the country, painting as someone who's begging for your votes, which is what it's supposed to be? Did you see him do that in 2011? Do you remember him doing that in 2004? Do you remember him doing that in 1997 for the first election that was held under the new constitution that was adopted in 1996? So let's not pretend that in 2025, Mr. Biya is not doing just exactly what he has done in previous elections. The only difference now is that, yes, everyone is aware of the fact that our president at the age of 92 is not physically there. And to say that there is nothing revolutionary in saying that, it applies to every 92-year-old person.
You think the opposition is not hitting hard on this?
If you don't mind, let me just run on this. At the age of 92, a law does not prohibit anyone, including Mr. Paul Biya, for running for president. Because our law, our constitution, echoed by the electoral law, fixes a minimum age for being president. You must be at least 35. But it does not fix a maximum age. Therefore, by law, even if Mr. Biya were to be 105, he could still be a candidate. However, we are talking here in human terms. In human terms, the law can say one thing, but physiology says something else. Physiology says something. Physiologically, who expects a 92-year-old man even to run the affairs of his family? Talk about his family. In our families, our parents who are lucky enough to live until their age 92 don't run the affairs of the family. They leave the affairs of the family. Even if he was a businessman, he sits in his lounges in his living room, and his sons who are running the business. We saw that with the Kajis of this world. We saw that with the Victor Fotso of this world. It is your family business, but at 92, you don't run it. Your children, boys or girls, whom you have groomed in the meantime, are the ones who run it. They come and report to you, Papa, this is where we are now, and you advise. Sometimes you even abuse them, insult them. People remember what I did, but you do not yourself. This is clear. You do not yourself project yourself there as the CEO of the company. So let alone running an entire country. That's all that we're saying. We say physiologically, the president is not there. Now, granted that physiologically he's not there, and you ask me, where is he? I cannot answer that question. But you know why I cannot answer that question? Because we have been used to him not being anywhere. And therefore, if he does not appear, it doesn't strike us as strange. Several decades ago, when President Biya attempted to walk in the streets of Yaoundé, people have that image in their mind. When he left the palace and went towards around the gardens of when he and his family walked there, it was a national event. It was a national event for Cameroonians to see their president and their first lady and their young children at that time walk about in their capital city, Yaoundé. So we've been used to that, and that is why it is possible. That's why it is possible by the established practice. It is possible that in 2025, a person who says he is a candidate for president, where he's going to beg you Cameroonians to exercise your sovereign authority to vote him, does not have the decency to go on radio or television for even 5 minutes to announce his candidacy himself. But it is not surprising because in previous years, he did not announce either. It is people who went and deposited his candidacy. Same thing, very soon, the presidential election campaign will be declared officially by law and following the law governing this issue. Well, I bet you we should not be surprised if when that time comes, people are going to come by instruction from him, on his instruction, and say that, he will gather enough energy and come for the short period of 5 minutes or so on television and say, I launched my campaign. And from that moment, CPDM teams will go throughout the country in all the 10 regions to campaign for him while he stays in a 2D. But we've been used to that pattern.
Yeah, I am wondering, for those of the CPDM who actually said they support him and they want him to be the candidate, yeah, in the ballot box it could be something else. But what goes through the minds of those people who support that idea? Is it because they have been used to, or because they are subjected to something that has kind of shaded reason following the analysis you just made?
It's because they are pursuing their personal interests. They're pursuing their personal interests because of the way, again, Cameroonians should be fully aware of this, and I presume they are. So let us just repeat or point out the obvious. It ought to be the obvious. Namely, that there isn't a single person who is exercising any state authority today in Cameroon, in any state institution, that does not owe that authority or power to the exercise by President Biya of his power of appointment.
But even if you owe that power to President Biya, at some point, individuals have their personal ambitions. And all those people who have that power, who exercise power under him, could have personal ambitions that they could at some point say, okay, now I'm done. I need to project my own self.
Yeah, I mean, you would expect that to happen. But again, a context where there is freedom of speech, freedom of action, freedom to dissent, and so on. Yes, what you're describing there would be something to expect. I mean, after all, in many other contexts, people have been known to resign if their position is not accepted within the party. I mean, if I may say so, I am not the best example, but if I may say so, and I would say with pride, that I resigned from the CPDM back in the day where I had been National Secretary for Economic and Social Affairs. I resigned. I wasn't kicked out, I resigned. But why did I resign? I resigned because I was, at the time, very vocal on this Anglophone problem, which I said is a national problem, and it is us as a ruling party, the CPDM, it is us as a ruling party who should solve this problem. We should admit that there is a problem, we should recognize it, and we should lead, the action, the initiative to solve the problem. And when, instead of listening to what I was saying within our circles, I was tagged one thing or another, I got to the point where I had a choice. Either to continue to speak up and speak out on this issue, prepared to be, and therefore prepared to lose the benefits and all of that of being in the establishment, or remain in the establishment, but in that case, shut my mouth.
I want to dig in a little bit on this.
For many people, they get to that point. So when you get to that point, you have to make your choice. Now, it happens understandably that in the vast majority of cases, people choose to shut their mouth in order to benefit from the prerogatives of being part of the establishment.
Yeah, I want to explore this a little bit. When was this?
Oh, this was in 1994.
Yeah, 1994.
Yeah, not long after the AAC 2 in Bamenda.
Do you think the operations of the CPDM have changed since
No,
then?
they haven't. No, they haven't. I mean, they haven't. On the contrary, they've even gotten worse. Okay? They've gotten worse in the sense that, let me tell you, they've gotten worse in the sense that in the days of Ahidjo, where we had the CNU, which in 1985 or 85 became the CPDM. Now, in the days of Ahidjo, and in the earlier days of Biya, the CNU, subsequently the CPDM, was accepted and perceived to be the ruling party. And that had consequences. As a ruling party, its organs had to meet regularly to validate the action of the government, which emanated from the resolutions of the congresses of the party. So the CNU, and subsequently the first maybe 10 years or so of Mr. Biya's reign, the CPDM, the Congress met as required by the statutes and the rules and regulations of the party every 5 years. So the Congress met, the Central Committee met as per the party statutes, the Political Bureau met regularly as per the party's statutes, and in Ahidjo's time, he would come to the party house to hold party meetings. So the meetings of the CNU under Ahidjo were always held at the party headquarters, not at the presidency. Okay? Now, in that context, there was room for internal dynamics and so on. You could tell within the party, people could feel who is the rising star here by the kind of during the debates and stuff like that. So there was a considerable dynamism within the ruling party. But unfortunately, for the longest time so far, the party has been relegated to the background. Forget about appearances. In effectiveness, the party has been relegated to the background. When is the last time that the ruling CPDM had a party congress, which is supposed to be every 5 years? When was the last congress of the CPDM held? When was the last meeting of the Central Committee of the CPDM held? When was the last meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPDM held? So the party has not functioned as it should as a ruling party, but it poses itself as a ruling party through and smothers the life of the party even at local level. Politics, if I may just say quickly, politics is a profession. Politicians make a career, but how does it go? A young person takes an interest in politics from secondary school time. You're passionate about politics. Perhaps you're a member of. You campaign to be a student leader and all of that. The next thing, you who have politics in your blood, who are passionate about it, the next thing you do is you join a party, and at local level, you are, comes time for council elections, you put in your candidacy and you are elected, you beat your fellow party members in the pre-selection phase, you beat your opponent, and from the council level, you go to the assembly, you become a parliamentarian. The next thing, you may eventually want to be an elected, in the present context, president of the regional council, president of the republic, and so on. So that's how politicians operate. But the way it functions in Cameroon, unfortunately, and I feel sorry for young people who want to be politicians, that environment is not granted them. You have people sitting in Yaoundé who are designated as the regional delegate of the CPDM for this or that region. You come to divisional level, the regional delegates of the CPDM for this and that. And the people sitting in Yaoundé, appointees. How do you run party politics by appointment, by designation? It doesn't work that way. And that has killed, one of the consequences is that this has killed the practice of politics in our country and frustrated the ambitions of young people who have political ambition, frustrated them because of the way the game is played by the ruling party does not allow young people who really want to be politicians to emerge.
I was going to probe a little bit into the dynamics of debates and decision-making within the CNU under Ahidjo, because you kind of make it sound like Ahidjo was not the dictator everybody thinks he was, as opposed to how Paul Biya is managing the CPDM. Looks like there was more dynamism, more debate under Ahidjo, or was that debate only aligned to Ahidjo's views, or contrary views were also accepted in the course of our conversations?
Yeah, Ahidjo was an autocrat. No one doubts that. Okay, that perhaps if you ask himself to self-describe, he probably would have told you that he is an autocrat. He made no bones about it. But you see, he used his autocracy for the public good. In the years, the 20-odd years that Ahidjo was president, take the balance sheet for someone who became president in 1960, at the time that Republic of Cameroon, subsequently joined by Southern Cameroons to form the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Everyone knows what the Federal Republic of Cameroon was in 1961, 1962, 1963. What did the country have at independence? But in the years that Ahidjo stayed in power, from that 1960 to 1982, just see in how many domains Ahidjo brought progress. All of it in contemplation of the plight of the people. So Ahidjo finds that we are an agricultural country, that our people are mainly farmers. And what does he do? He promotes the agricultural sector. He comes up with things like Cameroon wants to have autosuffisance alimentaire. We want to be self-sufficient in food. And what does he do? He doesn't leave it at the level of slogans. He sets up institutions like Mideviv, Mission de Développement de Rural Vivien, to accompany farmers to get their product from farm to market. He said,
how did he ensure that his policies were working? Because apparently Paul Biya is doing the same, but his policies don't work.
First of all, I would like to ask you, when you say Paul Biya is doing the same, what has he done that is comparable? Because
he created Cameco. Today I saw abandoned planes of Cameco that was created just about 10 years ago.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. When you say he's doing the same, he's not really doing the same.
Yeah, how did Ahidjo ensure that his policies worked?
Ahidjo was a nationalist who took particular pride in Cameroon. And that, in fact, I don't suppose any honest person can dispute that. Ahidjo was proud about Cameroon. And he took actions to translate that sense of pride in Cameroon. For a country like Cameroon to defy, to step out of the French-driven thing called...
the Francophonie?
No, not a Francophonie. I'm talking about the airline.
Air Afrique.
Air Afrique. to step out of Afrique, which was a multinational Francophone African country thing. For him to step out of that and say, hey, Cameroon, my country, we are going to establish our own airline, Cameroon Airlines. And he did. And Cameroon Airlines competed with and against Air Afrique. For Ahidjo to say, my Cameroon, as we are now, we are going to have our own shipping line and establish Camship. For Ahidjo to say that we are no longer going to depend on training our doctors in Nigeria, in Canada, in France, in this, and in Great Britain, and so on. We are going to start our own school, queues for training of our own doctors. Right across the board, you saw how Ahidjo, in sector after sector, driven by his sense of patriotism and nationalism about Cameroon, established these things. Okay, so for that he did tremendous things. But for him to do that, especially bearing in mind also, don't forget that he came to power in the midst of all this Makiza war and all of that, in a country which suffered and continues to suffer this high sentiments of ethnicity and tribalism and all of that. So he came to power in that context, wanting to say he was uniting the country. He has to present himself as the father of the nation. I want to bring everybody together, le père de la nation. We have to build our country in unity, and that is why we should forget all these things about several political parties. Let's form one party, convince the others to join them to form the CNU and all of that. Now, he did that knowing that for him to accomplish all of that, he needed to assert his authority. And from that perspective, he made no bones about it. But then again, just see the way he proceeded. He was an autocrat, yes, but again, he came to politics. He came to politics through the grassroots, from the grassroots, right? Ahidjo came to politics as a member and subsequently leader of a political party who had to campaign in his constituency in Benue to be elected a member of parliament. In the same way that back in our own territory, we knew that if you wanted to do politics, you had to campaign for your constituency to vote you to the West Cameroon House of Assembly. And when your constituency votes you, you owe it respect, because you know that 4 or 5 years later, you are going to come back and your constituents would disown you and vote for someone else. Now, in the East Cameroon, it was the same thing. So people like Ahidjo started as constituency politicians. So he knew what it meant for constituents to be the ones holding power. And therefore, phase after phase, he implemented his vision, autocracy, but in a very methodical manner that took into account his cognizance of the fact that we owe power to the base. That's why in West Cameroon, for example, he had to treat with Foncha and Muna and the rest because he recognized that they were constituency politicians. However, in the present dispensation, people don't owe their power to their constituents anymore, to the citizens anymore. Bernard must have observed, like me, that today in your area of Cameroon, you might not be known by people, or even if you are, when people sit in your village or tribal or subdivisional councils, people don't know you. Or if you show up, you may be one of those who are set to go and sit in the 4th rank or 5th rank or 7th rank in that hall where you are. But if you go to Yaoundé and you establish your good relations there, and one fine day at the news on CRTV or radio or television, your name is read, Dr. Bernard Ngalim, Secretary of State for XYZ, Minister for ABC. From that moment, in the present dispensation, from that moment, you become the political leader of your people.
Exactly. That is one of the arguments that Esingang has used against his party, saying that they have organized a coup d'etat constitutional against the president because he keeps on appointing, how does he call them, traitors, who don't have political understanding and political mastery and political base, and are thwarting his political agenda. By the way, Paul Biya himself, he lacks the political base on which he sits. Because he came in from the top.
No, he came. I mean, it is President Biya. I mean, history has it. We can't deny that. President Biya became president initially. President Biya became president by appointment.
By appointment, yeah.
Right? He became president by appointment. And since then, every other office holder, whether in civilian or military and all of that, hold their power by appointment. And that power by appointment is exercised by one person.
In all this, it appears to me that the opposition has copied the same modus operandi.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, you're right. Without you developing it, I can see where you're coming from and where you're going to, because it's blatant also. When I see the way in which certain supposedly opposition political party leaders run their parties, I mean, there are all signs of the CPDM model there. When you have a political party leaders telling you about décision numéro tant, and blah, 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 portant désignation de, and then he appoints people to their executive. If that person becomes president tomorrow, what model do you think is going to apply? It's going to be the same model, or people who founded their parties, who became the first president of their parties, the founding presidents, if you like, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they are still the leaders of those parties. So and then they purport to be opposition party leaders. So the CPDM model under President Biya has many imitators and may well come to represent the norm, which unfortunately it ought not to do.
That is where the trick is, because whatever the case, if Biya leaves power today and another person takes over power with the mentality and the manner of approach that we have already seen these opposition leaders play, it's difficult to conceive a future where Cameroon is going to be different or a change is going to come, unless we have somebody like a benevolent autocrat like Ahidjo, who says, okay, here, now, forget everything about absolute democracy and implement these strategies to see the future of the country move forward. But in 2025, 26, 27, 28, is that feasible?
No, I personally, one of the reasons why, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, I have been silent about the present presidential election cycle is that, in my view, the outcome of this election, regardless of who is elected, will not take Cameroon out of the situation where we are now. I have hope in Cameroon being saved, but the actions to save Cameroon will begin after, not before, not during this presidential election. Will begin after. And it will be driven by Cameroonian citizens, not political leaders, not political parties, citizens. But for that to happen, the citizens will have to educate themselves to accept and exercise their civic responsibility. Because for the time being, Cameroonians are not exhibiting that. They are not exhibiting that. So it could, if Cameroonians after this election accept that sovereignty lies with them and that independently of any political parties, they are prepared to assert that sovereignty, their actions will get whoever wins power in October 2025 to sit up and respond to the aspirations of the Cameroonian people. That can happen. It can be done. It will require a different mindset of Cameroonians, and people can work to change the mindset of Cameroonians. If Cameroonians don't do that, forget it. Because you see, the president, by the way, in this connection, let us acknowledge the fact that when we say, as a matter of analysis, if after analyzing we come to the conclusion inevitably that President Biya has exercised powers as an autocrat. But paradoxical as that may sound to some people, he is a legal autocrat, Bernard. He's a legal autocrat. He's even a constitutional autocrat, because the powers that he has exercised and that he's continuing to exercise are given to him by our constitution. A constitution which, yes, adopted under on his watch and tailored to him. Okay? So the exorbitant powers that our constitution gives the President of the Republic, he appoints to all offices, civilian and military. He is president of the Higher Council of Magistracy, the Conseil Supérieur de la Magistrature. He is in short, you name it, the universities, the public universities and all of that. Everywhere it is the power of appointment of the president. He decides when there's a need to evacuate someone who is ill abroad to go and for treatment in Paris or elsewhere. On public expenditure, it is the president of the republic who gives the final approval for you, Bernard Ngalim, to be evacuated for treatment abroad. So our president has exorbitant powers. Now, because these powers are given by the Constitution, can you imagine somebody else being elected come the 12th of October 2025 as president, and that same person, after being sworn in, I presume if you take into account the electoral calendar and all the other measures that will be taken after the results have been announced, will be well into November. So can you imagine somebody else being sworn in as the new president of Cameroon in November 2025, and that person will not exercise those constitutional powers? And if the person exercises the constitutional powers, what does he or she become almost from day one? Autocrat. So change in Cameroon will require going back to the drawing board and the people of Cameroon giving themselves a constitution that promotes democracy, freedoms, a constitution that holds people who govern us, including the President of the Republic, to account. They've got to be accountable. A constitution that truly holds the people up as being the sovereign authority, not the President of the Republic. Now, such a constitution will have to be, adopted for us to begin to dismantle the democratic, autocratic institutions that have so far functioned. If that doesn't happen, forget it. Anybody who becomes president would. So let me very quickly say this again, kind of anecdotally and as a witness of history. I am prepared to swear. I'm prepared to swear that when President Biya came to power in 1982, he was a Democrat. He believed in the precepts of democracy. He believed in the fundamental freedoms of citizens and all of that. I am prepared to swear that he did. Because the statements that he made when he took power lead me to believe that unless someone else put those words in his mouth, lead me to believe that that was a true expression of his inner feeling, his own personal convictions. But in the months following his taking power, and when he was showing those signs of being that kind of liberal leader and all of that, a group formed around him, the Esingang. Cameroonians, they remember that. A group of elite, so-called, from his region gathered around him under the auspices of Esingang and told him, you cannot pretend to share or to exercise power as if you don't know that it is now ours. It was in the hands of other people, the Northerners, for so long. They took it from us, from Ngalim Bernard. It has now come back to us after almost 25 years. You are not going to exercise it the way you appear to want to do. It is our turn. And when, unfortunately, not long after that, the attempted coup d'etat occurred with the traumatic effect that this meant, where the president people could tell and say, didn't we tell you? Didn't we tell you? And he came close to losing his life. From that moment, the president withdrew into his shell, and we see the manifestation of that today. So tomorrow, someone else takes power under this same constitution. Don't be surprised to see that very quickly a Esingang equivalent would form around that person and say, it is our turn, don't fool around, all that democracy can come after we too have chopped, Okay. Those are some of the details about our governance system, which Cameroonians must not pretend not to notice.
I wanted to go through the elements you gave about the future and how to structure the next generation of Cameroon. But this Esingang issue is kind of interesting to me because it appears from every indication that those who are holding power in Yaoundé now are a set of people who agree on certain things. Do you think it's a continuation of the Esingang group that is struggling to keep Biya there and at the end of the day reorganize amongst themselves and designate one of them as the successor to Paul Biya?
No, it is. I mean, I would answer that without hesitation. It is a continuation of the Esingang. Now, the high priest of the Esingang may have changed in the 40 odd years since the president came to power, but when one set of players are either ostracized or they step down or they fall out of grace, a younger crop, as it were, comes. The same phenomenon continues. And let us, let's be honest. We're discussing about the affairs of our nation, of our country. One of the dangers in that climate of that period of 1983, 84, immediately following that attempted coup d'etat, was that while Esingang was flexing his muscle, we saw equivalencies cropping up in other parts of the country. For example, the one that sticks to my mind was ELECAM. You may have heard about that too.
In the West region.
The West region, yeah. So the elite of the West region were exercising their muscle in the context of within the framework of ELECAM, very much the way that the Esingang were doing. And therefore, it is not unlikely that today someone from the West region were to become president. Don't be surprised that ELECAM will So it's a phenomenon in our country which we cannot pretend not to be aware of.
So the problem here now is if Esingang holds the power continuously, there is a possibility for the ELECAM to say the North, you already had it. Esingang, you already had it. So it is now ELECAM, and we need to have that power.
Yeah.
And if Esingang hold tight to it, the ELECAM may preemptively, or could the ELECAM preemptively want to accede to that power? Is that a possibility?
Well, in a context like this, anything is possible. We can't say that it's a certainty, but it's one of the possible outcomes. So in our analysis, we should not shy away from the facts, or for that matter, from uncomfortable truths. We should not shy away. These are specificities of our country, and we have to show awareness of them and then know how to manage them in our governance system. But if we pretend not to know, then we find ourselves being taken by surprise. There's no basis for surprise there, because we see the thing evolving, we see it coming, and we have to point it out. So, if we approach the exercise of power in our country in terms of this region has taken for 25 odd years, another one takes now for 50 odd years, or the next one comes and wants to take for how many years? How long will it take before it gets to some of us? 1,000 years? No, so that cannot possibly be the paradigm. And so we have to build. So part of the march towards the new Cameroon, because that's what we are challenged to do as Cameroonians. A new Cameroon. We have deliberately and consciously to lay the foundation for a new Cameroon. Look at this past 60 years or so, I don't know how many more we're going to add to them, as being, okay, this is the colonial and immediate post-colonial era, where in fact this era, although headed by Cameroonians, has functioned in the same way as the colonial establishment did. In colonial days, the establishment made Cameroonian people, the colonized, work their body out for the benefit of the colonists, le colon. Okay?
I want to.
And we've done the same thing in the so-called independence period. But we have to say to ourselves that now is the moment where we have to discard, get out of that colonial arrangement, whether headed by Cameroonians or not, and start what is effectively our own Cameroonian system, in which we cultivate a new Cameroon. That new Cameroon has to be established.
Yeah. So let us look at this. The new Cameroon, according to what we have discussed already, shows that it can only happen after the elections, and it will be led by citizens, not by politicians.
Correct.
Citizens need to take up their civic responsibility, that is understanding their rights, understanding that sovereignty belongs to them, and only after that can they exercise this sovereignty and give power to those they want to give power to through delegation. But to achieve this, we will need a conscious citizenry. And under the current dispensation, the government won't tolerate certain forms of conversations or communication through the established channels in Cameroon. And those who talk about this would risk prison. So how do you intend, or how do you think this might be communicated out there to citizens to learn that power belongs to them?
Doc, do you expect this conversation you're having with me, do you expect it to reach Cameroonians?
100%.
Do you think it will?
100%.
Where are you sitting?
United States.
Where am I sitting?
United States.
Good. So you see, the means of communication that we have today allow us to overcome that obstacle that you have legitimately pointed out. It is to say that nothing in terms of access to the population and communication with the population is going to be as it was in the 70s and 80s, where you met only by physically meeting somewhere, where the police will get a report that these people are meeting in this house, and before you realize it, agents of in those days, SEDOC and the DOC, and I don't know what they call them these days, will they come in to molest you guys? No, I mean, today's technology has removed from autocrats that power to contain us. So, yeah, I mean, we will, and when I say we, I mean the Cameroonian people. I may or may not be there personally in terms of being of this world, but I am convinced that when that program that we are advocating begins to be rolled out, communication with the Cameroonian citizens will not be a big problem.
And that is one of the reasons for which we started this podcast, so that those difficult conversations that need to bridge the gap between those who are out of the zone of danger and those who are in the zone of danger can actually communicate freely. So the Beyond Africa podcast is ready to advance civic, responsible conversation for good governance and for the advancement and transformation of the continent. So we are always here. We are available. If you have communication that is geared towards the development of the continent, we are ready to host you and talk about it so that everybody learns about it. Because we need to get to the ends of the world and we need to have a conscious citizenry so that everybody contributes to the development of the continent. We don't want a situation where particular people stifle communication. I absolutely believe in the freedom of speech, freedoms of expression, and communication, because we can disagree, we can insult each other, but we should let every person say what that person wants to say in a reasonable and fairly respectable manner. We should not shut speech. I'm saying this because there is communication out there. Minister of Territorial Administration saying that he's tracking communications online and even within the country. I even saw some posts today that the National Communications Council is going to control and restrict and suspend journalists who don't coordinate conversations during this campaign period in a reasonable way. Where are we?
We are where we are. That simply shows that the present dispensation has no desire, no intention to change its ways. But again, that's understandable. As you say in French, c'est de bonne guerre. So we don't expect that they in the establishment are the ones who would make the concessions without pressure from anywhere. And so that pressure has to come from the population. If Cameroonians are prepared to organize themselves to exert pressure, that would happen. But if they choose not to, okay, then they might as well remain under this yoke for another 40 years. That's up to them. I mean, elsewhere in Africa, in recent years, we have seen example after example of where people say, we, the civilian population, we can't take this anymore, enough is enough. So if Cameroonians decide that they've gotten to that point also, fine. But if they decide not ever to do it, fine also, as long as they accept the consequences and don't complain about the consequences of their own ineptitude.
I saw a post where a Cameroonian political scientist, Musa Njoya, was very clear and emphatic on those who compare Cameroon's elections today to those that happened in Senegal recently. And he was saying that the Constitutional Council and the electoral body did not declare Diomaye Faye as the winner because they actually wanted to, or because those organs were neutral or independent. It's because the people of Senegal were conscious of their power, conscious of their rights, and forced them to do the right thing. So I am not sure if that is the context within which you think Cameroon is going.
Yes, the Senegalese example is one that is worth paying attention to. The Senegalese civil society are not very different from Cameroonian civil society in the sense that we don't see Senegalese as being people who are given to violence and a tendency towards destruction and so on and so forth. No, they don't. But the Senegalese are very aware, very conscious. They have a high level of political consciousness and a high level of awareness of citizens' awareness of their own power, the potential for citizen power, and they're prepared to organize themselves and exercise that power. Now, exercising the power does not necessarily require recourse to violence. If the time comes where you, the citizens, have decided that you are going to, just even acts of civil disobedience, boycotting this, abstaining from that, not attending this and that, examples of ways that citizens can indeed bring their message home to those who are governing them. So it doesn't always have to be through the use of violence. It doesn't even always have to be through going to the streets, where you then give the government a pretext to manhandle the citizens, shoot some, kill some, arrest some, imprison some, and so on. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. But where a people are determined to change their fate, they will always have the resources and the means to do so. Up to this point, I am not convinced that Cameroonians, by and large, have gotten to that stage. But I believe that they eventually will, if they want their things to improve. If it's just a matter of changing leaders, I mean, you can change this leader today, and if that leader is replaced by someone who is in his image, then the Cameroonians' suffering will continue. But is that what we are wishing for our country? I don't think so. But having said that, I also usually say that even the incumbent regime may wake up one morning and say, we spent all these years not listening to these people. We think that the moment has come for us to do so. And if they did so, what stops President Biya today? What stops him today from convening a genuine dialogue on the Anglophone problem? They tried in 2019. I participated, as you know, but that was not what we had expected to happen in terms of the way the thing was organized, the outcome, and what has happened with the outcome since 2019. So nothing stops. The same thing all over again. You're bound to draw the conclusion that 2019 was just a way to trick people into, deviating attention from the real thing, or as usual, to paper over the cracks, or just open the lid a little bit and allow some of the steam out while the pot continues to boil. We need a responsible and caring government in the face of what has been happening in the northwest and southwest for getting into the 9th year now, to say enough of that is enough. Let us sit down and sincerely have a sincere dialogue with a serious intention of addressing the grievances of these people. That can happen even under the present regime. It can. Even the present regime can say, okay, we have conducted elections the way we've done all this while. We are now that we've won power again, from day one, we are going to create the conditions favorable to the evolution of democratic governance in our country. And if they did that at the beginning of the new 7-year term, we would all be happy, wouldn't we? It wouldn't matter who is there. We will be happy. So the challenge is with them, whether they want to do that. And they can do that easily. But if they don't, then the challenge becomes that of the Cameroonian people, who have to decide whether they want to continue with that or not. And action of that kind does not have to wait to election time. So even between elections, if the people decide that they want change, they have all the possibility of orchestrating that change between elections. It doesn't have to wait until election time.
Absolutely. And even the minister who says he's the sheriff of the republic and the moulinex in which he's going to blend all the ingredients that advocate for their rights might not be aware of this.
Yes.
Dr. Simon Munzu, thank you very much for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast. Do you have any last words for our viewers?
Oh, well, thanks, Doc, for having me. I was ready to answer present whenever I'm invited to discuss these matters concerning my country. And I think we all have a responsibility to reflect on these matters. It is President Biya who so appropriately said, as to the effect that I may be paraphrasing him, but the substance is there, les hommes passent, mais la nation demeure. So none of us could put it better than him. Individuals come and go, but the Cameroonian nation, the Cameroonian people will remain. And each of us, while we are here, has a responsibility to contribute our little bit to make sure that the problems that are facing our country get better, not worse. And that has been my approach. I am not a politician. I have no desire to become one, but I'm very concerned about what happens in my country. And I congratulate you for the role that people like you are playing, because a lot requires that we change the mindset, not only of those who are governing us, but also of us, the citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon Munzu, for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. It's been insightful, educational, and meaningful. As I always tell you, I bring guests who would tell you what you need to hear, how you need to hear it, and above all, they give a plan of action. They tell you what you need to do to make Africa, Cameroon, better places to live in. Before I leave you, as we have already discussed in this conversation today, if slogans were the word, Cameroon should have been a better place. Slogans don't build a country. People do. People with meaningful intent do. That is why at some point we realized that Ahidjo was an autocrat, but we have some nostalgia for his autocracy because his autocracy was purpose-driven. The economy was better than it is under the freedoms that we have right now. So we would prefer to have an autocrat who thinks about the people, builds the people, but of course, we would never, and we should never sacrifice our freedoms for anything. Freedom first, because with freedom, everything follows. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And just to inform you that I have a poll that is ongoing. I'm going to leave it in the comments section as a pinned comment. Please fill that poll because it gives us the trend of people's thoughts, what you're thinking about the elections and the political landscape. So it helps us invite competent guests to come and discuss the issues that we want to hear and help us to project into the future, both immediate and long term. Thank you very much. As usual, we call on you to like, subscribe, comment, and share this podcast with your friends and your networks so that everyone understands that it happens here. Knowledge is delivered here on the Beyond Africa podcast. Thank you and see you next time. All right.